Hi there and welcome to the channel, and it feels so good to be back after 2 months away, during which time I've been focused on my studies, and I also had surgery on a wisdom tooth. So for a month or so my face was out here. My face has, however, as you'll no doubt observe, now returned to its proper size, and so I'm ready to return. And so what you'll have in this video is a bi-monthly wrap, April and May's reading. So without further ado, let's begin, and we start with a real departure for the channel because it's a novel by a contemporary author, a prize-winning novel no less, the Booker Prize 2018, over 500,000 copies sold, and now I believe a TV special. It is Anna Burns' Milkman. Alright, so many of you watching may already be aware of this. You may already have read it, but for anyone who doesn't know this novel, it's intriguing, it's experimental, it's supposedly rather difficult. And what it is, in effect, is a memory narrative or memory monologue of middle sister who's looking back after a period of 20 years at her 18th year, 2 months of her 18th year to be precise, when she attracted unwelcome attention from two men. One of them, the titular Milkman, a paramilitary leader, the other, a regular stalker. It's set in Northern Ireland in the late 70s, 1979, I believe, but all of the markers of that place and time have pretty much been removed, with the idea that it could be a representation of any kind of totalitarian society. And what distinguishes this is the voice of middle sister. It's unique, and for that reason, this is a unique reading experience. Thoroughly recommended, lots of verbal energy and a considerable amount of artistry on display. I'm reading it for the second time now, and it really does repay a second pass through the text because I'm writing a term paper about it. Yes, the ending, it has to be said, in my eyes was flawed, but you're never going to get a perfect work of art when you're talking about commercial fiction of this kind. So much better than I had expected. It is Anna Burns' Milkman, strongly recommended. Now, back to my passion, French literature, and it was a great time these last 2 months for making fresh discoveries, and here is my first one. The Holy Terrors by Jean Cocteau, Les Enfants Terribles, and this in a New Directions paperback, which includes numerous sketches by Cocteau, very good artist, and this was exceptional. It blazes forth with its own unique energy, and it concerns two siblings in a repressed, incestuous relationship who become exceedingly wealthy through no real effort of their own, and because of this they're able to construct their own universe, which begins originally in their low rent accommodation, yes, in what they call the room, but by the end it's a particular space inside a huge mansion they've inherited after some kind of movie star that the female sibling got married to perishes, as you would hope to perish if you're a movie star, in a high-speed car crash. And what you just have here is the way they draw in two acolytes. So you have failures, basically, a male failure who becomes besotted with the female sibling, and then you have a female failure who becomes besotted with the male sibling. And what it all boils towards is an astonishing climax, a violent tragedy that you don't necessarily see coming. And this really was work of art like no other. If you admire Genet, then you're going to really enjoy this. It is Cocteau's The Holy Terrors, strongly recommended. I'll be reading much more of his stuff. Then another French writer I really adore, Guy de Maupassant, with his Bel-Ami, and this is a study of Parisian high society and what it takes to get to the top of it in the late 19th century. And our hero, or rather anti-hero, is Georges de Roy, and at the start he's just returned from Africa where he's been in the military, and he's back in Paris with no money. I don't think he even owns a decent shirt, and he's decided that he must make his way to the top, which he duly does over the course of 300 pages or so. And his path to the top lies through the manipulation of women. So he treats a succession of women absolutely abominably. He is a heartless monster, and any sneaking admiration you might have for him at the end of the novel, Maupassant makes sure to do away with by having an awful scene where he beats a woman furiously, and you just think, yeah, this man is just a real piece of work. But he does achieve his aim, and what that says about the society of the time, well, it's deeply bitter about what is going on, because by being an absolute, I don't want to say any bad words on the channel, but you can rise to the ranks of the nobility. And it's the betrayals in here of the various women that are so spectacular. Yeah, there's plenty of twists. I don't want to spoil this for you. It's beautifully written. It is Maupassant's Bel-Ami, a wonderful novel. Next up, a novella by Gidé, and it is the Symphonie Pastorale and Isabelle in this Taiwanese copy. That's why it's so awfully produced. Just a photo stat of a penguin novel. And I just read the first novella, the Symphonie Pastorale, which I read for the first time 30 years ago. I wasn't that impressed. Just shows how dumb and ignorant I was in my youth, because reading it again, age 50, it absolutely blew me away. I did review very favourably Gidé's Straight is the Gay. It was the last review for the channel, and I would say the Symphonie Pastorale is definitely the equal of Straight is the Gay, if not better. And what Gidé has over other novelists is the astonishing climaxes of his novels and novellas. They are absolutely heartbreaking, heart-stopping. They just make you fall back in your chair like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And this one, I can't go into it too deeply because obviously I don't want to spoil it, but the entire world falls apart at the end of this, in effect. And the story is about a married clergyman who goes out to a dying old lady who duly dies. And then in the corner, he finds this unkempt, grimy girl who can't communicate and is blind. And he takes her away with him because there's no one else to look after her. And after cleaning her up, we get this kind of Helen Keller-esque story, because actually underneath the layers of dirt and neglect, she is a very beautiful and intelligent young girl. She is blind, so she doesn't know what the clergyman looks like. And basically, he falls in love with her. But the novella is narrated by him, and it's a masterclass in self-deception. Everyone around him knows just what is going on, except for he himself. He's in a complete state of denial. And not least among the characters looking on is his long-suffering wife. And towards the end, an opportunity arises that will turn the world on its head. And he has high hopes of the outcome of this event. And instead, it all goes wrong in truly tragic fashion. I won't say any more. Absolutely superb. The Symphonie Pastorale. Then 2 French novels I read in French. First of these is a light romantic comedy, Audrey Tattoo on the front of Amélie fame. I strongly suggest tracking down the movie because this was wonderful. It concerns this female character whose husband dies near the start of the novel, suddenly without warning, and she's widowed, and her boss at this Swedish company based in France keeps coming on to her. He's married and she doesn't want anything to do with him. And her knight in shining armour is a very unlikely figure. It's this dorky Swedish guy who's got a very quirky take on life, and slowly but surely he enters her affections and they fall in love. And it's just magical the way the relationship develops. There are some postmodern kind of aspects to this. It just drops in recipes and receipts and football scores, telephone numbers that are incidental to the main line of the narrative. I'm not really sure why. It's just been kooky for the sake of it. However, it was really well written and I greatly enjoyed this. La Délicatesse. Then an older French novel, Pascal Lainé, The Lace Maker. This was also made into a movie, and it does recall actually, where is it? Oh, let me show you. It's Benjamin Constance Adolphe, because you have this tragic love affair where the woman just kind of wastes away because of her heartbreak. At the end, just perishes in really unfortunate circumstances. and the male character can just kind of go on with their life. And so this is pretty much an indictment of male behavior during the 80s. And Lainé even addresses his male readership at one point and says, look, haven't all of us done such horrible things to a woman for no reason at least 2 or 3 times in our life? And that's really depressing to contemplate, because Pom, the heroine, Pom after her cheeks, not apples, is a very beautiful, simple person actually. And it's understandable why she's got no real understanding of why she's been so suddenly dumped by her aristocratic boyfriend, who's really such a selfish narcissist. And she goes home to her mother distraught and then just basically wastes away. And he then finds out about her demise and makes use of her death in the most cynical way imaginable. I didn't really enjoy the second section of this, the midsection, which is narrated from the point of view of the horrible boyfriend, but on the whole, pretty enjoyable read with lots of sociological asides. Yeah, very much the style of Pascal Lainé. So, The Lace Maker. Then, Alexandre Dumas. Phil, the son of Alexandre Dumas, and this is his Camille. Another tragic love story. I just can't get enough of these. This one's good. It's kind of proto-feminist in how deeply it delves into the ins and outs of being a prostitute. At the start, Camille, the heroine, has already died, and a man has bought a journal from the sale of her effects. A month later, there's a knock on the door, and a young man enters and says, did you by any chance purchase a journal at this house? I was away at the time, but I really want to have hold of it. And the man says, sure. He goes, why not? Here you go. And then he says, I must tell you my story. And then he unrolls the narrative of his love affair with Camille. It's supposed to be heartbreaking at the end, but unfortunately, the structure of the novel kind of takes away from the impact of the conclusion, because in effect, he's already lived through the events and now he's telling them to another person. So that greatly diminishes the force of the climax. However, it's very directly written, not a lot of artistry on display, but a fairly gripping narrative. Nevertheless, Camille. And another French book, this one's superb, said to be Proust's favourite author. It is Valéry Larbaud with Childish Things. This is really hard to get now. It's out of print. You might have to pay a bit of money for this. And I was very fortunate to pick up a copy in mint condition. You can purchase a PDF of it online from, not from the actual original publisher, Sun and Moon Classics, but from what they've now turned into. And I'm going to read you a little bit of this. Sorry. If you enjoy Denton Welsh or Proust, you'll probably get a lot out of this. It's childhood from a child's point of view in 6 or 7 stories of varying length. And one of the best is the shortest one, which concerns an hour in a child's life. And we know that an hour can be a very long time, an eternity in a child's life. And most of these little children are rather wealthy, has to be said. So the one I want is called The Hour with the Face. Yes, 65. And it's about a boy waiting for his music master to arrive. However, the music master has not appeared for some reason. And you get into that situation where you're watching the clock, hoping that he won't show up. You know, he's 5 minutes late. Oh, he may still show up. He's 10 minutes late. Oh, could still show up. And then as it gets to 20 minutes, wow, maybe I'm going to have an hour to myself rather than practicing the piano. And so here is how he describes this potentially free hour. And it says, 5 o'clock is the coast, which has already disappeared. 5:30 will be the open sea, where a white sun dashes against the black glass floor that heaves and falls as the mind tries to pinpoint the instant when the halfway point is reached. It may be a free hour, but it's also an empty hour without play. Don't budge. The slightest motion would capsize the canoe in which, on the ocean of time, a small boy is paddling with all his might between 5 and 6 o'clock. Beautiful, right? And there's some great stories in here. I definitely advise that you track it down. If that has interested you, it will be worth the money. And I think another good story was quite a long one, all about the imaginary continents that these children create in a back garden over the course of one summer. was just beautifully imagined. And as you can see, very well written, a beautiful translation. Okay, one more time. Valéry Larbaud, Childish Things. Then we have one final book written in French. Originally, it is Rousseau, Reveries of the Solitary Walker, a kind of supplement to his Confessions, which I believe I've mentioned numerous times on the channel. Here they are, one of my favourite pieces of autobiography. All right, so in the last year or two of his life, he wrote this, and it has to be said, it was pretty disappointing. I think there were just 2 of the 10 walks in here that I really enjoyed. One of them was on the subject of rumour, and another one was on truth and falsehood. So really only for die-hard Rousseau fans, but it's a great title, isn't it? The Reveries of the Solitary Walker. Yeah, magnificent title. Moving away from French literature, some drama now. And first up we have the Oresteian Trilogy by Aeschylus, and I read the second play, The Libation Bearers. At the end of the first play, Agamemnon, Clytemnestra murdered her husband Agamemnon in the bathtub, and Cassandra also perished. In the second play, you have the returning Orestes, Agamemnon's son, encountering his sister Electra at the tomb of their departed father, and Clytemnestra has sent Electra and a group of women there to make an offering to her departed husband because she's having all kinds of nightmares about the evil deeds she's perpetrated. And basically, the first section of this play is the chorus, Electra and Orestes whipping one another up into a frenzy until finally Orestes is ready to go into the palace and murder his mother and her lover Aeschylus. And that's pretty much it. I do enjoy reading these as texts, but even better is watching productions of them on YouTube. So I'll put a link to some of my favourites in the description, but highly recommended. Aeschylus. More drama, and this time it's from shortly after the Elizabethan period. 3 Renaissance travel plays in this series that has been made available by the University of Manchester Press, and I read the second one, The Sea Voyage, which is a reworking of Shakespeare's The Tempest. It's not as good as The Tempest, but it still has its moments. It features cannibalism and an island inhabited by Amazonian women. It's a tragic comedy, and it's very brief actually. I enjoyed it, and I'm going to write a paper about it, but I guess this kind of book is really for students interested in studying the early modern period. Yes, very good. And now some short stories to finish. And the first of these was by Henry James. Now I know Henry James is pretty much out of fashion at the moment. His writing style demands a kind of investment on the part of the reader that few are willing to make in our rather superficial times. But I read the first story in here, The Private Life, and it was absolutely superb. I kept looking up and saying to my wife, this is astonishingly good. And it starts out as if it's going to have a supernatural element, but then what you find is that it's a profound psychological study. So highly recommended. I do love some Henry James. And to finish, another collection of short stories, and it is Dubliners by James Joyce. I did read this a long time ago, but I'm reading it again, why not? And I read the first 2 stories in here, The Sisters and An Encounter, both consummate works of art, but not the most engaging works in my eyes. I think there are some better stories in this collection, just very deep and sort of exploring new ground in terms of what fiction can be, but nevertheless has its moments. Dubliners by James Joyce. Okay, so now all that remains is for me to choose the best read of the last 2 months. And it's going to be Cocteau's The Holy Terrors. Now I realise at the start of this video I sounded rather vague in my praise for this book, and I guess that's because it's so difficult to capture quite what makes this so great. But upon reflection, I'd say it's the way it pursues its own logic so single-mindedly. New images, strange ideas, idiosyncratic lines of thought, they're all here. At no time do you get the feeling that you're just retreading old ground. It's something new and beautiful that is being produced in front of your eyes. I had no idea quite in what direction this was going to go, and how often can you say that when you're reading a literary work. So for all those reasons, this was definitely the best book I read in the last 2 months. Jean Cocteau's The Holy Terrors. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes this video. Once again, it's great to be back, but all that remains now is for me to bid you farewell in time-honoured fashion. So until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.